Good afternoon. It's Friday the 13th of August 2021, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Well, we're getting straight on with the pretty tragic news from Plymouth yesterday, Patrick, the shooting that took place.
That's right. We were actually on site last night at the scene, and so these are the latest details that have been more or less officially confirmed here regarding the incident. 6 fatalities in total, including the shooter. Victims include 2 males and 3 females, including Mike, one, I believe, 5-year-old girl. This is a recent report that just came on the wire before we went to air. Police confirm it began as a domestic incident, so it's not terror related or anything like that. It's residential stroke domestic. The weapon was a shotgun rifle, and the assailant shot himself, was found dead at the scene after he had left the property. And they go on, this is the worst mass shooting in the UK for over a decade. And we'll just go back a decade here. This is 2010, Lake District shooting. 12 people died in that rampage. This was apparently a cab driver, 52, eventually, again, turns the weapon on himself as well. But just to go back to the shooting, now they do have a name for the suspect. Here his picture right here. This is all over the media at the moment. Name is Jake Davison, 23-year-old local resident. Worked as a crane engineer stroke operator for defense and nuclear services contractor, Babcock International. That is in Plymouth itself, Mike. So that's what we know so far. And so what's interesting, Mike, is that those are the sort of the basic facts that have been released on this shooting. But the media have gone really and spun this into a whole nother story.
Yes.
So we look at the Daily Mail here, and this isn't just the Mail, by the way. These sort of reports you can see elsewhere. So Plymouth gunman, 23-year-old virgin, posted rambling YouTube videos complaining he was too fat and ugly to have sex, and boasted about being the Terminator before killing 5 and then shooting himself, etc. Here, so the rhetoric in this article is quite interesting, Mike. Jake Davison, 23, a bodybuilder obsessed with not being attractive to women, named locally as a killer. So they're really kind of going for this angle here that he is part of this incel movement whose misogynist members have carried out mass murder in the US. So kind of framing this like it's some sort of defined organization or movement, and it's not actually. This is sort of a social media characterization that you could sort of label young men who are kind of, involuntary celibate is the long form for incel.
There definitely does seem to be some real effort to link this back to the United States. We're going to come on to that in a second, but certainly you noticed this morning that for a short period of time, Sky News had suggested that he had come from Arizona and was living in Plymouth. In fact, that turned out to be that he had put his location as Phoenix, Arizona, on his Facebook page. Presumably because he didn't want to put real data on there, but nonetheless, that was what Sky News carried for a little while, and we'll come on to a bit more about this later on. There's a definite attempt to try to link this back to the United States in some way.
Yeah, and here's the story they're sort of associating with here. This is the Santa Barbara shooting in 2014. This is Elliot Rodger here, how misogynist killer became incel hero. So, a lot of this, what they're calling these sort of online movements, a lot of this is generated by the mainstream media. They analyze, you have these people like BBC Trending and these different new types of journalists that analyze trends and memes online, and they sort of define and bring sort of some kind of shape to what they call movements. But really, a lot of it is just kind of things that are darting around constantly, various subcultures on Reddit and online here. Now, YouTube has basically taken his channel down. He had a channel called Professor Waffle, where he would rant and so forth. So they took it down. This account has been terminated for violation of community guidelines. So there wasn't a violation before, and there wasn't a sort of declaration that he was going to go on a mass shooting, but YouTube has basically taken it down. So you can't really analyze any of this. However, the mainstream media have taken a lot of the videos down very quickly and have then put out various clips. Now, if this is about psychologically profiling, which is kind of important, right?
Right.
For a case like this, you can't know anything now because they've erased it. So this is all in the hands of the authorities. So again, that's a whole nother area of debate itself here. But let's just go back to look at this, Mike. So this is how, look at this. So Professor Waffle, that life is rigged against you as part of his rants, and that we're on the brink of extinction, of being repulsed to the opposite sex. So this is more of this kind of incel crisis stuff. Now, I thought this comment was interesting. This is MP Luke Pollard, Mike. So he called the incident utterly devastating, which of course everyone can agree it is. But then said it's probably the darkest day in Plymouth's history since the end of the Second World War, when the Nazi Luftwaffe carpet bombed the city and its world-famous docks. Now, that last bit was, I believe, the Daily Mail adding a little bit extra, but in yellow, that's what Pollard said. So he's comparing this domestic incident, this shooting, to the, essentially to World War II and the Blitz. I think we see this so often, Mike, that politicians rush to make quotes to the media and they want to seem really kind of virtuous and concerned. And sometimes they really over dramatize the point they're trying to make. I think, is that
No,
a
I
fair?
think that's a fair comment.
Is that a fair? It's more than a fair comment, but I
Yes.
mean, we're being kind. But so a lot of the media coverage, I'll say the last thing, Mike, a lot of the media coverage focused for the most part last night on politicians' reaction to the event.
Yes.
And very little, because there was almost no information that was being released until much, much later, maybe early this morning, by law enforcement, by the authorities. So really the media is flying blind, not asking too many questions. But we've got some other angles to explore on this, don't we?
Well, first of all, let's just go back to the United States thing. This is Newsweek and more from the mainstream press. Plymouth shooter Jake Davison's social media shows love for Trump and guns. So that, again, attempting to tie this individual with some kind of movement, whether a real movement or not.
Radicalized online by Trump and so forth, right?
Yes. Now, it's some of the press suggesting that Jake Davison had a firearm or shotgun certificate. Just wanted to make the point briefly about what's required in order to get a shotgun certificate. First of all, you've got to have a referee who is prepared to vouch for you before you can get one. It's not a terribly onerous process to get one, but nonetheless, you do have to have a referee, and that referee is supposed to make clear that you are a suitable person to have a shotgun certificate. Sorry. Now we have been told, and thank you very much to the person who passed this along to us, from a local resident, that at one point his shotgun certificate had been revoked. That might happen because the police because it's down to the local police to decide finally who is entitled to get one of these. And so his shotgun certificate may have been revoked because they felt that he was not suitable for whatever reason, and certainly the mainstream press suggesting that he was disturbed in some way. And some of the commentary that we saw on this suggested that perhaps he was slightly, but not the worst case I've ever seen. But nonetheless, the information we have is that the shotgun certificate was revoked at one point and then was returned to him. Now, we've seen this before, and that is with Thomas Hamilton, of course, at Dunblane. And it was Dunblane massacre was the event which caused the most significant restrictions on firearm ownership and firearm handling in the UK. Well, if you want to know more about the background to Thomas Hamilton and who his connections were, have a look at this article on the UK Column website, the Dunblane Massacre, Crown Office Obstruction and Disinformation. But he had also had his firearms license certificates revoked at one point, and only had those returned to him after the intervention of Lord Robertson, actually. So
Lord Robertson vouched for him so he could get his firearms.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So I'm not by any means suggesting that there's something conspiratorial going on here. I'm just saying that in the circumstance that a firearms certificate has been removed, there clearly has to be some care given about whether it is then returned if the police have concerns about somebody. And I think if there's an area of investigation to be looked at in the coming days and months, it needs to be if the information we have is correct, it needs to be ascertained why that was returned to him and why he was allowed to continue to own the shotguns. So anyway, well, look.
Do you think the last thing I'm going to ask you, Mike, is in the wake of the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania and also the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand just a couple of years ago, then became a big push by the government and the media to basically ban firearms or sort of close off the loopholes for making it more difficult for people to own guns. What was left of the available firearms that you could have, those loopholes were very much closed off after those events. Do you think the same thing will happen in the UK if an inquiry is held regarding this event?
I think that's a distinct possibility, yes, and perhaps we see further restrictions on firearms ownership in the UK. But we've got to ask wait for the results of whatever investigation there is, and I think before that step was taken, we would have to understand what the circumstances around his certificate issuance. Yes. So anyway, let's move on. Tragic as that was, and let's move on to this. This is Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, and well, good news apparently, because apparently if you're double vaccinated from the 16th of August, Patrick, you will no longer be required to self-isolate if you come into contact with someone, close contact with someone who tests positive for SARS-CoV-2. So Sajid Javid here asking the close contacts of people with COVID-19 to self-isolate has played a critical role in helping us get this virus under control. Millions of people across the UK have made enormous sacrifices by doing this, so that's wonderful stuff. So this, of course, was originally announced last month when they announced the situation with respect to step 4 of the COVID-19 roadmap. And they're saying that now, with 75% of people having received both doses of the vaccine, the majority of adults will no longer need to be self-isolating when they come into contact with people.
On this statement from Javid, Mike, quickly though, part of this is true and the other part is very debatable. What's true is that people have made enormous sacrifices to get the COVID under control.
Yes.
But what's debatable here is when Javid is saying that these measures played a role in sort of bringing the virus under control. I mean, where's the scientific proof or evidence for that?
Well, this is a very good question, Patrick, and something that occurred to me was, well, surely we must see some different sort of behavior going on in perhaps a country that hasn't, or countries that haven't had the vaccination program and so on. So there must be some place on the world where we haven't seen vaccination roll out that might give us a clue as to what happens under normal circumstances with this.
Or even last summer in the UK, Mike. Oh, we wanted to go there.
No, we don't want to go
but,
there. No,
everything dropped to the floor and there was no vaccine. So I guess that was because of the vaccines, right?
Right. Well, indeed.
Must have been.
Must have been. So I thought maybe we should have a look at Africa and see what's going on there. We haven't looked at Africa in quite some time. And this is CNN World. Delta variant has spiked COVID-19 deaths in Africa by 80% in 1 month, the World Health Organization says. So what are they saying? Well, if you look at the bottom of the screen there, the text's very small, but I'll just read it out. It says deaths increased by 89% from 13,000 to 24,000 in the last 28 days.
Wow, that's a big number, Mike. 89%?
It's 89%, yes. But
that's a big number.
It certainly sounds like a big number, but 24,000 out of 1.4 billion people doesn't sound like such a significant number. Right?
Oh, that's not so big.
No. So I just thought we would have a look at the latest. Here's Worldometer here showing the situation in Africa. I'm only going to show a few of the top, the top 15 countries there.
Quick caveat, this is Worldometer, and these are based on PCR data. So we'll just make that qualification.
Well, yes, absolutely, because what I'm talking about here is their numbers, the official numbers, because this is their narrative that we're talking about. Correct. So the first thing to notice is South Africa comes top of the list with 2.5 million cases that they claim are COVID cases and 76,000 deaths. And these are deaths that are attributed to COVID-19. And what I'm going to say is that's significantly higher than any other country in Africa. But when we look at the population sizes in some of these countries, they're huge. So South Africa is roughly, in terms of population, similar to the UK, 60 million or so. But if we look down at Ethiopia, for example, 118 million people in that country. Egypt has 100 million people. Nigeria has 211 million people. Nigeria has 211 million people, but only 2,200 deaths so far, and only what's that, 180,000 cases so far. So this is without vaccines. This is without self-isolation and test and trace and 30 billion pound track and trace programs and
The
stuff like this.
2,200 deaths in Nigeria?
Yes. Okay.
220 million people.
Yes.
Pretty good.
Right.
Sort of
So why is South Africa different? Well, of course, South Africa is probably the most westernized of all those countries. But for example, what you'll notice is that Lesotho is not on that list of the top 15 because it's well down the list, despite being right in the middle of South Africa. So perhaps the borders are completely closed. So anyway,
I think I heard what happened with Lesotho, Mike. They put up giant plastic PPE shields
right
around the borders, and that kept Corona from getting in, basically, from South Africa. That's the science.
Okay, so look, the bottom line here is that we're not seeing the levels of death and destruction in Africa as a result of SARS-CoV-2 that was claimed, should they not get the vaccinations. And indeed, Sky News, I'm not really sure when this was produced, but Sky News has this page, this feature on their website, COVID in Africa, and they're asking this question about why are the deaths in Africa not as significant as we were told they would be. So let's just have a brief look at some of this. So this is showing a graphic which is supposed to show the relative numbers of deaths in various parts of the world. So you've got North America on the left there, South America at the top, Europe underneath, and the relative size of Africa, despite the relative population size, is just massively small. So how does this work? And so they ask there at the bottom, so why are the official deaths rates in Africa so low? So let's have a look at why. So South Africa has the highest death rate in Africa, but it's still only 40% of that of the UK. So that is interesting. But here's perhaps one of the reasons. People in Niger, for example, are 25 years younger on average than those in the UK. So there's an acknowledgement here that SARS-CoV-2 only attacks people that are older. And in fact, as we've made this point many, many times on the program, when you look at the profile of those that get ill and that die from SARS-CoV-2, it seems to replicate normal illness and mortality in the general population with general other illnesses. So, and this seems to be the case in Africa as well. But Africa's coldest country, Lesotho, is 5 degrees warmer than the UK. So the problem here, Patrick, is that the UK is not warm enough. And that's why more people are dying in the UK, apparently, because it's warmer in Africa than they're doing much better. And basically what the upshot of this is that really there's no explanation in this article as to why the deaths are not appearing and the excess mortality is not appearing in Africa, where they do not have Western health systems and they do not have vaccination programs.
That's right. That's right. You know, the moral of the story here is, Mike, that, you know, we need to get more COVID relief aid to the African people, those poor countries, so that they can have public health institutions and systems like we have, so they can have lots of PCR testing, and then they too can also have a pandemic, just like we have in the West, Mike. And I think that is really the message that our public health authorities and experts are trying to ram home, is that Africa needs a pandemic, and to do that, we need to fund all of their test and trace. We need to get them all the sort of PPE kits, and most importantly, Mike, we need to get them vaccines.
Yes,
because Africa must need vaccines, right?
Well, that's right. So we're seeing press releases from the government like this: UK providing COVID-19 humanitarian remittance relief fund to Africa, provided vital support for almost 750,000 people across 8 southern African countries impacted by COVID-19, including Madagascar. But this is just a very small example of the type of things that they're rolling out.
And no impact from COVID-19 in any of these countries to speak of, right? So you follow the money. So this is the virtue signaling. They want to get Africa on the program, basically, because Africa's not on the program.
Right.
And that's a problem, because then they don't look like they're having a crisis, we can't have that now, can we? But enter the International Monetary Fund, Mike. They're always the source of great financial aid packages and various debt packages that'll saddle these poor countries into financial ruin for generations. And they're saying the COVID-19 financial assistance and debt service relief, courtesy of the IMF, and they're looking at ways that they can get more money for rapid COVID-related arrangements. Borrowing countries have committed to undertake governance measures, this is a key, to promote accountable and transparent use of these resources. So in a way, this is like basically paying off governments. You give them COVID aid or quote COVID relief. The EU has done this, by the way, especially with the Eastern European member states of the EU, that taking that COVID money was basically quid pro quo, that they're going to go along with the narrative and the sort of the crisis, the emergency, the pandemic. But really, the people in Eastern Europe, a lot of them are just quietly scoffing and almost snickering, saying, yes, thank you very much for the money, Brussels, but we're not really going to go full on with your pandemic here. And that's what's happened in Bulgaria, Romania, other countries, especially in the Balkans and Eastern Europe. And by the way, they're probably not going to go hell for leather for the old unlicensed experimental gene jabs either. Okay, that's not going to happen in those countries. So they're going to have to double up the effort somehow with regards to pressure, political pressure, propaganda, maybe a crisis outbreak. They can, publicize some more anecdotal stories of children and orphanages in Romania, whatever. The sort of the drill. So we just went to get a little bit of more focus on this, and we went to AMREF here. This is one of the Health Africa relief NGOs, and here's the agenda right here in fine print. Reopening Africa's economy, I didn't realize they closed. But anyway, reopening Africa's economy relies on substantial control of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, you just showed us those numbers, Mike. Do you think they've got a pandemic going
Don't see any evidence of it.
in Africa? I guess not. But anyway, the Western NGOs say differently, Mike. So control of the pandemic depends on a combination of personal and collective health measures, strengthening the health systems, and achieving COVID-19 vaccination targets. Aha, now we're getting somewhere. And so they go on here. The African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, that's all they need, is an African CDC, sets its target at 60%. We're talking about vaccinations here. However, Africa is currently projected to reach its target in 2023. The rest of the world will reach 60 to 80% in 2022. They're sure of this, Mike. And the US, Canada, and some European countries projected to reach their targets even earlier, December 2021. So this is all about vaccine targets.
Right.
Okay, that is basically the end all be all for public health now. It's how many people you can get vaccinated. Vaccine levels equals public health. Now, is this really the best way of looking at this quote issue of public health? There is a lot more to public health than vaccines. And I'll tell you right now, if they spent half the money that they're throwing around on COVID relief and printing up like crazy in Western countries and throwing at all their countries, our countries, ourselves, and other countries, they could have clean water for every African country, without a doubt. Every single resident could have clean water in the continent for what they've blown on the pandemic, just in the Western countries alone. So let's talk about public health now, shall we? But let's look at the vaccine issue in Africa. And I remember this report. This is from 21st Century Wire. By the way, our sources on this are AP and the WHO. So the fact checkers on Facebook originally flagged this. People who saw this article know we had that controversy with Facebook with this article, and I'm going to announce, Mike, Facebook removed the fact-checking roadblock they stuck on this article. Okay, they had it on for 6 months. They recently removed it. Why? Because it's factual. WHO now admits Gates-funded vaccine is causing polio outbreak in Africa. This is a fact. Go and check their website for yourselves. We've got the links right here. But look at this. After spending $16 billion over 30 years to, quote, eradicate polio, international health bodies have accidentally, we're told, reintroduced the disease to Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, other Central Asian countries are hit by this new strain of polio spawned by a pharmaceutical vaccine. Fact. Okay, according to their own reports. So, in 2019, the government in Ethiopia ordered the destruction of 57,000 vials of type 2 oral polio vaccine following a similar outbreak of vaccine-induced polio. The WHO specifically warned of this alarming trend happening also in Pakistan. Let's look at what else. The same incident has happened in India as well. It's important to note that the oral polio vaccine is being pushed by the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, okay? A consortium which is supported and funded by.
That couldn't be Billy Goats, could it?
It's not a trick question, Mike. And indeed, Billy Goats.
All right.
There they are. Oh, sorry, we had to take them off the screen very quickly. But anyway, let's go here. And by the way, this experimental COVID-19 vaccine is being tested on the African population through Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, another organization funded by the Gates Foundation. A large round of human trials is taking place in Southern Africa. This was last year, run by the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. And guess who funds that university? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Are we not seeing a pattern developing here? So polio being driven by the vaccine rollout. This is documented.
So is this a coincidence that South Africa happens to be the country with the highest claimed incidence?
No, it's not. And if you look on the WHO's committees and panels, you'll see some of their African representatives are all from which country? I think some of their people on their panel, they seem to be dominated by South African.
Yeah.
And so they're working for those universities, so they're getting their funding from all of these same sources, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they're tied in with Gavi. And who is the number one funder tied for first place for the WHO itself? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Mm.
So all roads lead back to this organization and its money, and it's putting that money forward. It's also subsidizing the research and development of the COVID vaccines for all the major pharmaceutical manufacturers, which they did during 2020 to get this project off the ground. And so how much do we know about the financial interest that the Gates Foundation has in some of these pharmaceutical companies? And the sort of the biotech industry in general, how much of their portfolio is fueled by these types of companies and these types of industries globally. So, but it's not just about money, and that's only one part of it. It's about control. It's also about an agenda. There's a social engineering agenda, and there's also an ideological agenda and a Malthusian agenda, UN Sustainable Development Goals, UN 2030, Malthusian population management, and things like this. These are all widely known and widely spoken about priorities of this group of people. And I think people need to look very closely at who these people are and what their actual beliefs are, what their actual worldview is. And you'll see a lot of pedigree with the eugenics type of rhetoric as well with some of these same elites.
Yes. Now, the UK government this morning released a press release which showed that they'd done some research, Patrick, and it was really good because they discovered that in schools, in fact, there had been an extremely low incidence of COVID-19. That's their claim. Very low incidence of COVID-19 in schools. But despite that, we're still seeing pressure on to vaccinate the 12 to 16-year-olds in the UK. Well, who's leading the way in Europe with respect to 12 to 16-year-olds? It's France, of course. So let's just remind ourselves that as of the beginning of this week, France's COVID pass, their health pass, is now required. So let's just translate on that. And what this is saying is that from August the 9th, the health pass is mandatory. It applies if you're attending or going to catering establishments, bars, restaurants, including on terraces, with catering and takeout prepared meals, professional road and rail catering, restaurant services, hotel bars, non-commercial catering, and so on, trade fairs and exhibitions, professional seminars, health care environments. If you're visiting somebody that's in a hospital or in a care home, you've got to have your COVID pass. Long distance travel, including on TGV, domestic flights, also intercity trains, and intercity coaches as well. And department stores and shopping centres of more than 20,000 square metres, you're going to require a COVID pass to go to those as well. And then as of the 30th of August, in a few, when is that? Tomorrow, in fact, in a couple of weeks' time, sorry, the health pass is going to be made applicable to anybody who is going to work in those places as well. And it will also be compulsory for anybody aged 12 to 17 as of the 30th of September. Now, if anybody's wondering about this, then France opened up their COVID-19 vaccinations to 12 to 17-year-olds. This was published in June. So this is when France began that process. So they're leading the way. And if anybody has any doubt that that's therefore coming to the UK, then I think that would be a mistake.
Now,
So
there's boycotts by some of these businesses that we've seen reports on social media, Mike, that venues are basically saying no to the government. They're not going to require their customers to be showing their pass sanitaire or their vaccine passport.
right,
So I think the key is how many people in some of these industries will get together, how much solidarity there is on this issue. Because if there's mass boycotting in France, and that's a high possibility, by the way,
yes,
because the movement in France against the government on this issue is growing by the week. It's not shrinking, it's growing. The government knows this, but rather than back down and try to make some sort of middle ground or make some consolations with the opposition, which is the public, basically,
yep,
the government of Macron is doubling down
yes,
twice as hard. Now, it remains to be seen whether the police and members of the military, how loyal they are to the government that's basically laying waste to the French Constitution,
right,
basically. So, and that cuts right to the heart of the French identity. So we are, in many ways, people are looking to France, the people of France, not the government, to be the leaders on this issue. And I think a lot of the people in France realize they have a global audience on this issue, and that they have a common cause with people all over the world. People are looking at to France really to take the lead on this, to show everybody else what can be done. Because in Germany, that's not the case. The German government's going, which we'll show you in a minute, it basically announced that, yeah, total restrictions, just like they're doing in France here.
right. So it can't be too far down the road from here as well. And the question is, are we going to take inspiration from what's going on in France in terms of the pushback on it? But the question is, are vaccine passports justifiable in the first place? Well, this is the Telegraph. This is what they're saying. This is what the government's saying. And the headline is Delta variant has wrecked hopes of herd immunity, warned scientists. Now, of course, what they're talking about with herd immunity is vaccine derived herd immunity here. They're not talking about naturally derived herd immunity because that doesn't exist anymore, Patrick. That's been dropped by the World Health Organization. Everybody's dropped that idea. The whole idea of naturally derived herd immunity is gone.
But vaccine-derived herd immunity, isn't that an oxymoron? Because we know, and the officials have admitted, the vaccine does not provide immunity.
Which is exactly the point of this article, right? So here's an extract. It says the Delta variant has wrecked any chance of herd immunity. A panel of experts, including the head of Oxford vaccine team, said as they called for an end to mass testing in Britain, so Britain can start to live with COVID. Scientists said it's time to accept that there's no way of stopping the virus spreading through the entire population, and monitoring people with mild symptoms is no longer helpful. And so the point here is that because the vaccines don't provide immunity, they don't provide any, they don't stop you getting the whatever variant they're choosing the Delta variant at the moment. We know they're going to end up with 50, 100 other variants in the way past. But the point here is, Patrick, the point I'm trying to make here is that if vaccines aren't doing their jobs, and they're admitting that they're not, setting aside any argument about whether they reduce hospitalizations or reduce symptoms or not, just the issue of spread, which is what vaccine passports is about, then how can they justify the narrative doesn't stack up. The official narrative does not stack up here. They cannot justify the mandatory vaccine passports when they're admitting that vaccines don't provide any restriction, or they don't solve that problem.
I think what we're seeing now, Mike, in broad daylight, their narrative is now eating itself, basically. So the whole thing is just a complete train wreck. So yeah, the dog is eating his tail on this, and everybody knows it. If you look at social media, you look at the forums, the comment threads, Mike, everybody is laughing because they know that the narrative is completely bogus and it doesn't add up now, even according to their own parameters. So it's not even getting into to the finer debates of the science. According to their own numbers, their own claims, their own parameters, and their own, quote, intervention measures, none of it adds up and it's totally contradictory. So where do they have any credibility left? And the answer has to be no.
Well, I don't think they had any credibility from the beginning.
To begin with. But the media, Mike, is generally giving the government a free pass on this.
Yes.
And they're going along with the gag too. And what's the result of that? Do you think that this is going to give people, the public, more trust and confidence in the mainstream media, or less trust and confidence in the mainstream media? What do you think the answer to that's going to be?
I think I know it's going to be less, and the mainstream media is going to get more hysterical as a result.
And blame alternative media
Yes.
and people on social media for spreading more misinformation and so on and so forth. Here we are. Welcome to the Soviet Union of 2021.
Yes, indeed. So the question is, what is going on with vaccines? What kind of job are they doing? Well, the latest COVID-19 vaccine surveillance report is out. This is week 32. And well, I just want to remind everybody, because the claim from the UK government is that we've now saved 80,000 lives as a result of the vaccine rollout.
Almost as much as the white helmets.
Yeah, well, indeed.
Close.
And the question is, how are they arriving at this number? We've mentioned this a number of times. We want to remind everybody how they're getting to these numbers. So Public Health England and other government and academic partners monitor the impact of the vaccination programme on levels of COVID-19 antibodies in the population and different disease indicators, including hospitalizations and mortality. This is done through population-based testing and through modelling, which combines vaccine coverage rates in different populations, estimates of vaccine effectiveness, and disease surveillance indicators. So we're talking about models and we're talking about estimates. This is the theme through this entire document.
That's the science.
That is the science. So let's look at the direct impact on hospitalizations. The number of hospitalizations averted by vaccination can be estimated by considering vaccine effectiveness, which is another estimate.
Coming from pharma itself.
Yes. Against hospitalization, vaccine coverage, and observed hospitalizations through modeling and using a range of parameters. But of course, those parameters are completely arbitrary. They're kind of guesses.
There's nothing scientific about this.
There is nothing scientific about this. Direct and indirect impact on infection and mortality. Public Health England and Cambridge real-time model has been used to track COVID-19 infection throughout the pandemic, providing key epidemic insights, including estimation of reproduction number to the scientific pandemic, so SAGE, SPI-M and SAGE. Effectively. So look, this is the basis on which all these claims are being made. There is no actual basis for them whatsoever. It is a guess based on another guess, based on a model of a guess.
Which is what? It's a virtual world that they're creating here. Computer modeling, computer estimations, that's SimCity basically. I got a great idea. Why don't we give them part of Australia, and everybody who wants to go live in a virtual computer modeled world led by Neil Ferguson and these sort of people, you can go live in some corner of the world, give them the part of abandoned barren part of Australia or something like that. And you can all go there and live in a virtual world and model yourself to your heart's content, okay? And just keep modeling crisis after crisis. Sit there locked in your room playing Netflix, computer games, and whatever you're doing at home there. So get all your stuff delivered from Deliveroo and just model yourself. Model yourself. I think that's the way to go. Let's just have a parallel society for people who want to live in a virtual world of virtual pandemics and things like that. I think this is a great.
Well, this is their plan, I think.
Let's crowdfund it. What do you think?
Okay, we'll start that. We'll
yeah.
start that after the summer break. Now, just before we move on to another topic, I just want to come back to the French government's pass sanitaire. And of course, this document has been doing the rounds on social media and so on. People getting very excited about it, and why? Well, because if we look down at the bottom left here, let's just blow that up a little bit. We find that this document was apparently published in January 2020, which is before the first case of COVID-19, the first claimed case of COVID-19 in France. And so many people are asking, well, how could that possibly be? And some people are suggesting that this thing is therefore pre-planned, and so on. Now, the answer to this that is coming from the French government is that this is a typographical error, that they used Adobe InDesign to typeset the graphic or typeset the page, and they used a template for that, which was originally created in January 2020. and that they simply made a mistake. And
A
certainly,
faux pas.
a faux pas, yeah. And certainly, if you look at the details of the document, the PDF document, it says that the creation date was the 9th of July 2021. But of course, that's the creation date of the PDF document, which is derived from the InDesign document. It shows quite clearly there that it came from Adobe InDesign. It was exported from Adobe InDesign as a PDF. But that doesn't give us any clue about what date the InDesign document was created. So we can't say either way whether this is a typographical error or not. We can't make any claims either way. What we can't say is that there's no definitive proof that it was a typographical error other than a statement from the French government. So I leave people to make up their own minds on that one.
Sure, and even here's the point. There's a lot of these memes that keep floating around. There's like a new one each week that goes around like wildfire across the internet. We get them all the time. And so even if it's true, or even if you can prove somehow, which you can't, but even if you could prove that this was done ahead of time and scripted ahead of time, even then, what good is it really going to do you today? We're already sort of a year and a half into this debacle. So we've got clear and present dangers, and we've got plenty of evidence of pre-planning aside from this. Look at Event 201 and things like this. So we already know that there is an advanced agenda regarding a global pandemic. So that's beyond debate. So why get hung up on this? There's other things that people need to be focused on, like vaccine passports, for instance.
Yes.
So we're just throwing that out there.
Okay, and just a brief update from the European Medicines Agency, because they have released their latest safety updates for the various vaccines. This particular one on screen is for BioNTech, but they are saying that they have now discovered, or they're looking seriously at a number of new adverse reactions as opposed to blood clots. So they're talking about erythema multiforme, a form of allergic skin reaction. There's kidney inflammation, and also a renal disorder that they're particularly looking at. We're not seeing similar types of announcements from the MHRA in the UK, and many people may be wondering why that is, and maybe the MHRA needs to be contacted to find out why there seems to be this disparity in approach between the various regulatory agencies. The European one deserves plenty of criticism, but it certainly seems to be doing more in this area than in the UK. So we'll keep an eye on that and see where it goes. They're still claiming it's small numbers involved, but nonetheless, they are clearly doing some kind of follow-up on the reports that they're getting.
Not only that, Mike, we're going to give a shout out to Doctors for COVID Ethics, because they have been lobbying the European Medicines Agency very hard for quite a long time. They've drafted a couple of incredible letters, and also the scientific papers that have been presented to the agency. And there is now plenty of evidence that there is definitely a serious issue with regards to vaccine side effects and platelets, blood clots issues, and things like that. So Doctors for COVID Ethics has really worked and focused really hard on that issue.
Absolutely they have. Okay, if you like what the UK Column does and you would like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, and there are options for you to join us there, and you'd be very welcome. That'd be very much appreciated, and also share material on the various platforms that we're still on, including brand new Tube, Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. And where does that take us, Patrick? It takes us to the Edinburgh Festival.
Well, the Edinburgh Festival, this is a big event. Obviously, the play, the Fringe Festival as well. Here's a show, Mike, that I think is it's actually making a lot of waves. This is called Killing Granny. This is by the comedian and actor Phil Zimmerman, and this is playing up at the Fringe this week. It just started on the 11th. I think the last show is on the 19th. This is at the Hanover Tap. Okay. Now we've spoken to the playwright himself. He said that some of the shows are already sold out. So they had a limit on, because of, quote, social distancing, which is baked into the show, these sort of narratives. But they've expanded the capacity, so there are tickets available. So if you're in the Edinburgh area, or you want to see an amazing show, or go to one of these events and you want to pick a good one, we think this is going to be like really good. This is a comedy show about the pandemic, about COVID. Put it back up on screen there. And so it's pay what you want. So, I mean, the tickets are really affordable. We're talking about a couple of quid, but some people are paying more if they like it. So that's all within the spirit of the Edinburgh Festival. Killing Granny, Phil Zimmerman's show, one-man show at the festival. We highly recommend it.
Okay, and a reminder that this is the last UK column news before the summer break. The UK column office is going to be closed from Monday, the 16th, until the 30th of August. And the news program will also take a break during that time. We will return on Wednesday, the 1st of September. So a massive thank you to everybody that's been with us the past since the last summer break we took, and thank you very much for all your support. It's been fantastic.
Is that the English Riviera?
Torquay?
Is that Torquay in the background? The beautiful palm trees.
Absolutely, must be.
It's looking good.
Yes. So where does that take us?
Well, it takes us to a campaign that we're seeing on social media right now. This is Professor Piers Robinson. He's been on this program many times. A lot of people are very familiar with his work. Now, C.J. Hopkins is one of the first people that we saw do this. Basically, after the restrictions that have been announced in Germany, those who are unvaccinated will be barred from all of the following. And Piers Robinson explains, "My name is Piers Robinson. I live in Germany. I am banned from restaurants, traveling by plane, train, attending religious ceremonies, schools, cultural events, and otherwise participating in society because I refuse to convert to the new official ideology, hashtag new normal." And what Piers is saying here is that he is basically part of a underclass that has now been declared by government by the use of this sort of authoritarian, fascist, dare I say, Nazi-like policy, okay? And it is Germany, by the way, but Germany's not the only country doing it. And I don't think we should be squeamish by using the word Nazi, because didn't they have the similar restrictions
Indeed.
administratively during the period, during the Hitler Nazi regime? So listen, facts are facts. So we can't shy away from history. This has happened before in the past. This is happening now. How bad can it get? Man, if you're going to ask yourself that question, what do you think that you would have said to yourself 2 years ago? Anything that's happening right now, would have you believed what's happened? None of you would have believed it. So don't think that you don't know what's going to be happening in a year or 2 years from now. So what we're saying is wake up, people. Okay.
Okay, and well, that takes us to the Telegraph and schools scheduling children's COVID vaccinations before approval is given.
Well, this is one of the things that a lot of parents and a lot of advocates for general human rights and constitutional freedoms had feared, is that the schools will be attempting to kind of do a runaround here. And so listen to this. So this is what the nub of it is. Parents have said they were shocked to receive letters from the children's schools informing them of a COVID vaccine schedule for the return autumn for their children grade or aged 12 to 15. So again, all of this is just being done completely outside of the scope of the citizenry, Mike. It seems to be all happening in the bureaucracy, and then the bureaucracy and the government's just been basically saying that's what's required. You don't have any rights. You don't have any choice in the matter. You must comply, otherwise you don't get access. I mean, isn't this incredible?
It is. Now, sticking with schools, of course, GCSE results day was yesterday, and well done to everybody that got good results. But record number of straight nines, as Labour says, poor children abandoned by the government. But again, we're seeing this grade inflation with GCSEs. Now, as far as I can see, just speaking purely about Plymouth schools, I see that some schools are sort of conforming with the spirit of the thing and others weren't. So the issue that I have with what's happened in the last 2 years, Patrick, is that we no longer have a national examination regime in the country. It's up to every school to provide grades and evidence for those grades to the government. But schools, of course, have a natural desire to see better results and the ability to generate better results. So what we've seen in the last 2 years, that schools that in the previous 20 years were not creating people with large numbers of high results are suddenly doing that, and it's getting past the current regime. And
In the last year.
in the last, well, it's because this is the second year of this type of
yeah.
exam regime. So this is very hard for children that have got good results, or maybe have got actually worse results than other children from a school down the road,
Mhm.
um, because the schools are not they're not following some kind of national standard here. It's now moving towards, well, correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the way it works when you graduate from school in the United States? At secondary school level, there's no national examination process. You graduate from your school, and depending on how well your school is perceived in the community, that is how you're perceived when it comes to getting jobs and so on. Is that
Yeah,
how it works?
well, America, we have this standardized university entrance exams like the SAT and the ACT, and that's used as a general barometer for
Right.
entrance into higher education. But they do have league tables, and they do have ways within counties, school districts, states, and nationally to rate the performance of schools. But it's nothing near like the sort of religious league table system that you have in Britain. But what it seems like is, Mike, they basically have wiped away all sort of expectations in terms of performance and lowered the bar so low for the majority of students. Why? Because of COVID, or
Yes.
to keep people from being unhappy or depressed because their grades were so poor because they couldn't get the education. I think the government and the teachers unions and the schools have used used COVID as a scapegoat because they've totally abrogated their responsibilities to provide in-person education. Instead, they ran home and wanted to have life on Zoom and mask up the children, send them home if they test positive, send the whole cohort home if one teacher tests positive. I mean, they've just destroyed education, and they're scapegoating COVID, and they're saying, but it's okay, we're going to give everybody A's
Yes.
and to keep everybody happy. I mean, this is like the worst possible outcome of
Uh,
the situation.
I think it is. Now, so what the government was saying was 79.1% of entries received grade 4 or above, which is equivalent to a pass, and 80.9% of pupils received grade 4 or above in English, and 77.9% received grade 4 or above in maths. Well, we'll come on to what's going on in the United States with respect to English and maths in 1 second, but just before we do that, one of the things that I'm aware of going on in Plymouth schools, of course, I'm sure it's happening right across the country, is that pupils are increasingly encouraged to go into the schools and self-identify as perhaps a different gender. They may want to change their name and so on, and schools are facilitating this. So the names are changed on the register. The teachers start calling pupils by their alternative names, although those names don't appear on their final results. For example, if they've done a qualification, it's on the register. And this is all being done without any communication with the parents. But look, it gets better, Patrick, because Scotland, again, is going to lead the way on this, and they're going to allow pupils aged 4 or above to change their gender and change their names in this way. They're going to encourage this type of behavior. And so, well, what can we say about that? Daily Mail here saying children as young as 4 will be able to change their gender at school without their parents' consent. Under guidance introduced in Scotland, any pupil who decides they want to switch gender must be supported and listened to in school following Scottish Government advice. It applies to primary schools where the youngest children are only 4 or 5, because recognition and development of gender identity can occur at a young age. But what's perhaps disturbing about this.
How does it occur at a young age? Is it occurring, Mike, because there are counselors and facilitators and education professionals who are teaching the children
Well,
about gender identification? And
primary and secondary schools have also been told to put books featuring transgender people on the curriculum, allowing pupils to choose which changing room or toilets to use and consider introducing a gender neutral uniform. Now, if children are being sexualized at an ever younger age, and if you're given the opportunity as a young, adolescent male to get into the girls' changing room, are you going to take that opportunity or not?
some might, and the reverse, if for male or female, they get a lot of extra attention and resources in terms of support when they do go through this process, and they also get attention from other students as well. This has been remarked on by a number of behavioral professionals about this very phenomenon, is that when children at a certain age, they're really are craving for attention, especially if they're not getting it at home,
Mm.
okay? And then to make themselves novel or unique, then all of a sudden the whole system comes and cotton wools them, basically. So this is arguably, according to some professionals, one of the things that's driving this quote trend. And what you find is also the children then grow out of it very quickly or not so long after that. So the danger is if they introduce hormonal replacements or puberty blockers and things like this, then the damage isn't something that you can just easily back out of,
Right.
because it becomes a physical situation that could last into adulthood. And this has led to a number of problems, and we've covered this in previous programs as well.
Yeah.
So it's still a problem.
So heading over to the United States then, well, your education system's something to be proud of, Patrick, particularly in Oregon, because, if we've got 70 or 80% of people in the UK getting grade 4 or above at GCSE in English and maths, in Oregon, Governor Kate Brown has decided that really you don't need to be able to read, write, or count in order to graduate from school. And this is really the most egregiously racist policy law that she signed up to, because this is all about aiding students of color who otherwise might not be able to get access to the same kind of learning opportunities. They might not get the same support from home or whatever. So it's better to just sort of, we've got to celebrate their differences. And this is, well, I mean, what can we say about this?
This is the most hard left governor in the United States here, Kate Brown. She's a total ideologue, a completely radical left winger who's cheering on the burning of Portland, the
Right.
biggest city in Oregon, supporting Antifa, loves the fact that they're tearing Portland to pieces and driving out residents. So what is she doing, Mike? She's basically eliminating, to protect minorities from the discrimination of high standards in schools. She's actually lowering the bar. So she's saying that minorities or people of color, that they're not smart enough, is what she's really saying. That is the total hypocrisy of the liberal and progressive left to a T. This is just the final culmination of this complete insane way of looking at society and the world. And they have just over-egged the pudding a little bit too much once again, and the souffle is going to collapse as a result. And so there will be a backlash against
Well,
this.
and indeed there should be,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, let's stay in the United States. To get kids back in person safely, schools should monitor what?
Well, this is this is basically a God speaking, the CDC in the United States. Now, notice how they frame this, and you're seeing more of this. To get children back to in-person, safe learning environments. So now in-person is a luxury. It's no longer the norm. It's no longer a requirement. It's something it's a luxury that you can only have if you're safe, okay? And then the bottom, look, stop community transmission. Does that happen amongst children with COVID-19? Do kids get COVID? No, they don't. So that doesn't count. So if they don't get COVID and they're not at risk, why do they need a vaccine? We can cross that out below. Testing. So why the hell are you testing all of these kids? And are there any outbreaks? Well, not really. So, what are we talking about here? Let's look at this. This is the sort of propaganda in full swing. The CDC recommends masks for all K-12 students, even those who have been vaccinated, okay? So again, this brings us back to the original point. The narrative is eating itself. So what do they need the vaccines for if A, they're not working and they're going to be masked up, locked up at home on Zoom and so forth? And by the way, look at this graphic. Look what they're doing along that top red bar above the map of the United States.
34.6 million confirmed cases.
Since when? Last month or since the beginning of 2020? They're keeping a running total forever. Nobody's ever done this in the history of seasonal diseases or any sort of epidemiology in human history. For the first time, COVID has somehow given itself such special status that they're going to keep a running taximeter forever, in infinity, basically, so that you'll be hammered with these big numbers years and years down the line. That alone should discredit all of the propaganda that we're seeing from government. They've broken the rules of record keeping in order to scare the bejesus out of you, basically. So let's look at this. And one of the worst offenders here, these are the people pushing masks on kids. This is the organization that has demanded that children be muzzled the American Academy of Pediatrics. Look at their Twitter feed. We'll bring in the bird here. Give us a little shimmy. Thank you, Twitter bird. Look what they're saying. This is ridiculous. Babies and young children study faces. So you may worry that having masked caregivers would harm children's language development. There are no studies to support this concern. Young children will use other clues like gestures and tone of voice. So, in other words, they're saying being around adults wearing masks doesn't delay babies' speech or language development. And who are they? Of course, there's no studies. Why
Well,
would anyone do such a ridiculous study? Because the answer is obvious. You can't mask up the population, and expect that children are going to be able to learn to communicate from infancy.
right.
So, this is the American Academy of Pediatrics basically uh, running, they have a totally unjustifiable position there because they're advocating masks from young children right through primary school. So they're doubling down on their narrative in order to basically uh, gaslight the population from their unjustifiable position. I mean, this is a illegitimate organization if they're supposedly advocating for children. I mean, people should really look at who are these mad people in these organizations.
Yes, there are no studies to support this concern. Okay, that's because there are no studies being done. But where are the studies that show that it has no effect?
Correct. So they're talking one-sided here.
Yes.
So and people are always using this same gaslighting technique in order to shut debates down. There's no studies to support that. And you can easily say to them, as you just said, Mike,
Yeah.
there's no studies to support your position either.
Okay, let's move on to green issues. And well, the Telegraph, we haven't really covered this yet, but this actually has been going on for a little while. So here's a headline from July: Telegraph prices under pressure from carbon dioxide crisis. This isn't what you might think. This is because there is actually a supply chain problem with carbon dioxide, and the food industry can't get hold of it. And so chicken prices under pressure is generating inflation. Here's another one: barbecue squeeze as CO2 shortages hit meat supplies. Here's another one: CO2 shortage could happen again. And another one from Gas World: UK CO2 shortage shows signs of easing within weeks. Well, perhaps, but look, this has been going on for quite some time. Poultry sector warns of new CO2 crisis with supplies on knife edge. This has actually been going on for a number of years now. It's not specifically, a couple of years now, it's not specifically COVID-19 related, as some of these supply chain issues that we're seeing are being blamed on the COVID crisis and the lack of HGV drivers and so on. But actually, this is more linked towards the fact that CO2 sequestration is something that is being actively looked at, and CO2 is not, the availability is increasingly not there. This has an issue. This is an issue for food storage because it's used to generate dry ice, for example. It's used for food storage. It's used for packaging, special types of packaging, and so on.
Beverages as well.
Beverages, of course, but
Carbonated.
carbonated beverages. I mean, people say that those, that wouldn't be much of a loss for people.
Guinness
but,
as well, I think. Guinness uses CO2, I'm not sure.
I don't know whether they
Yeah.
actually use that in the manufacturing process
Or
for
the serving
beer,
process.
but nonetheless, the point here is that this has an implication for food supplies, so I'm just throwing it out there as something for people to keep an eye on. But another thing for people to keep an eye on is the issue of wildfires. Of course, this has very much been in the news the last number of weeks. This is the World Economic Forum's page on this: wildfires around the world in pictures. And if you go to this, you'll see all kinds of pictures of wildfires right around the world. This is being driven, is being pushed very hard at the moment as we run into COP26, of course, because it's all about global warming. These wildfires are being created as a result of global warming, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Are they?
Well, that's what we're told.
Well, are we though? Because here's one example: 3 arrested for suspected arson over the wildfires in Greece.
Huh.
Here's another one. Well, actually, this is CNN attempting to debunk that last headline. Why wildfires happen, debunking the myth that arson is to blame more than climate change. Okay. Well, we've just seen 3 arrests in Greece over wildfires, and that's not climate change related. That's people setting fire to. Well, actually, it could be climate change related. Let's keep going here. Arson-loving PKK prime suspect as forest fires hit Turkey.
Oh, interesting.
Then what have we got? Algeria wildfires, 22 arrested for arson amid disaster.
And in California last year, we had the same thing, didn't we, with all the raging forest fires? So what's going on here, Mike? Is climate change affecting the minds of arsonists? What do you think?
Well, the question is, who are these arsonists? Are they climate campaigners? That's one question, because it wouldn't be beyond climate campaigners to take that kind of action to try to drive a particular narrative.
Extinction Rebellion, radicalized type people who believe that the world is coming to an end. As Alexander Ocasio-Cortez says, by 2030, we're all going to die. So, of course, if you were a radical XR Extinction Rebellion type activist, you might consider that you need to do something to, raise the alarm to get people to act, right?
But it's not just them. In Italy, the Italian government, the Green Transition Minister, Roberto Cigolani, apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, he has said that 70% of Italian wildfires are as a result of arson. But then Claudio Fava, who's from Sicily, and he's heads up the anti-mafia committee in Sicily, has said that, in fact, the mafia is involved in this as well, because they are clearing land in order to install solar panels and take advantage of the special green deals that are going for having solar panels on land. So it's like the dodgy green heating deal that was done in Northern Ireland, which resulted in the collapse of the Northern Ireland Executive, where effectively people were being paid to heat empty sheds. This is the same kind of thing. We've got green policies being put in place in order to provide grants to people for having solar panels on land. And what they seem to be saying in Italy is that criminal elements are clearing the land using wildfires in order to install solar panels and take advantage of these grants. It's a spectacular business model.
What you'll find, Mike, this is absolutely correct, by the way, and the mafia is involved in this type of activity. And you'll find this is also a problem in, guess where? The Amazon rainforest. And there are organized crime syndicates that are clearing the way for, guess what? Soya farming. And guess where, for the Colombian drug cartels, guess what one of the most popular cash investments is? Where to sink your money after you've made it from the global drugs trade? Well, soya plantations in Brazil. Okay, so you're seeing the link here, the connection. And so the mafia, and the mafia in Sicily and Italy and whatnot, they're only really emulating what the corporate mafia is doing. We have different stratas of mafia in this world, okay? Yes. And some are legal and some are, quote, illegal, okay? So they're both doing exactly the same thing. I think this is a beautifully put example to illustrate the true state of and fraud of the sort of the new green Great Reset type economy.
Yes. Okay. NATO getting very excited about the upcoming Zapad 21 exercises, the Russian exercises, because of course it's involving Belarus. And Belarus is this is the government to hate at the moment, isn't it? So here's the Russian website. Preparations for Zapad 21 strategic drills kick off. It's taking place in a few weeks in September. But we're just seeing, we're seeing huge amounts of anti-Russian narratives appearing in the press. This is Ukrainian press. Russia is ready to deploy nuclear weapons in occupied Crimea. So we've got Zapad 21 going on. We've got nuclear weapons being installed in Crimea. Russian military exercises gaze towards Poland. We've got to be scared of this. And this is the Washington Examiner.
Biden's sleeping there, by the way. He's taking a little nap.
Yes. And we've got, of course, the Atlantic Council coming out, concerns mount over Russia-Belarus military exercises. Jens Stoltenberg, we've got a tweet from him, discussed with President Nuseda the migratory pressure and hybrid activities from Belarus on Lithuania's borders. NATO is closely monitoring the situation and considering how we can further assist our ally and maintain safety and security in the region. I kept the best for last, Patrick, because you can tell us who the Jamestown Foundation is.
Oh my goodness. So this is a complete CIA front, this think tank. And so their main goal is to basically stir up tension with Russia and to sort of, activate various, let's say, jihadist forces in places like Dagestan and the Uyghurs there in Western China. So that's the sort of stuff, the cloak and dagger activity that the Jamestown Foundation gets up to. So yeah, it's all about China, the Russians,
Yes.
and so forth. So when you see this coming out in the right-wing media, especially in the U.S., for anybody from Jamestown, their main focus and their main objective is to get as close to war as possible.
Right. So their headline here is, as Russian military prepares for Zapad 2021, heavy armed forces stay close to Ukraine, because Ukraine is, of course, at major risk from Russia continuing.
I know, because guess what? They share a border.
Yes.
So, there's no way that the Ukrainians are going to be able to escape being a neighbor of Russia. So, so it's the job of NATO to keep stoking tension.
Yes.
That'll help the relationship, won't it?
Well, indeed. Now, on Wednesday's program, we highlighted this new website that the British Foreign Office is funding and is pushing extremely hard. This is Democracy, because they tell us what democracy is. It's not just a system of government. It's the mechanism that enables all citizens to express themselves without fear. It means that the rights of women and minorities are protected. It allows the press to challenge those in power and shine a light where it's needed most. It gives citizens the right to religious expression and supports the existence of independent judiciary. This campaign and its partners seek to highlight and defend the shared values which underpin democratic societies. This is what we're exporting to all kinds of places around the world. And if they're really sensible, they'll tell the UK government to take a hike. But anyway, we highlighted this on Wednesday. So if you want to see more detail on this, have a look at Wednesday's program. But I just wanted to highlight this because the White House in the United States, Patrick, is running a summit for democracy.
Oh, this is so inspirational.
They are reinvigorating democracy at home, apparently. They're going to rebuild our alliances with our democratic allies and partners, because, of course, they need to do that after Trump. Biden will be convening a leaders' summit for democracy. It's going to take place virtually in December. Heads of state, representatives of civil society, private sector, and philanthropists. Who could that be?
Philanthropists. I can't imagine who might be.
Gates.
No, and Soros.
Yeah. Well, he's mostly retired now, isn't he? But anyway, but what are they going to do? Well, they're going to discuss the global financial crisis. They're going to discuss all kinds of things like galvanizing commitments and initiatives across three principal themes: defending against authoritarianism, fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights. So really, that should make us all feel positive about democracy, and we're looking forward to that event.
Ticks all the boxes, doesn't it, Mike?
It certainly does.
So speaking of the economy, the economy that the government itself absolutely destroyed. And by the way, we didn't include this in the news today. New inflation figures out of the United States, 5.4%.
Yes.
Goodness gracious. They just said a couple of months ago that there was no inflation. So, I guess if you print up trillions and trillions of dollars out of thin air to pay for boondoggle projects and give free cash away for COVID relief, that it's not going to have any effect on inflation. I mean, who would think of such a conspiracy theory?
It is just a conspiracy theory. Don't worry, Patrick. Don't worry. The Federal Reserve and the Bank of England have both reassured us that this uptick in inflation is only a short-term thing. It's going to go away again by the end of the year. So don't worry about it.
It'll go down again, right?
Yes.
Yeah, things will get suddenly cheaper. Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to leave it there for today. Thank you very much for joining us today, Patrick. Thank you for joining us. Did you have something?
Just lastly, I just want to say thank you to everybody, all the emails, the messages on social media, the cards that we're getting as well, and thank for the work that we've done. And we say thank you very much for your viewership, for your audience this year. It's been a really difficult year. It's been a very challenging year for a lot of people. And also to everybody who picked up an Old Normal T-shirt. The Old Normal Army is out and been deployed.
And they're all gone.
You'll see them; they're all gone. But you can get the T-shirts if there's none left at the UK Column Community Shop. Go to 21stcenturywire.com. We put some Old Normal T-shirts up there, and if you get them this weekend, we can get them to you within 7 days. So we do have some stock at 21stcenturywire.com. go there, get your Old Normal T-shirt. If there's none left, you're sold out, aren't you?
Yeah,
At
we're absolutely
UK
sold out.
Column.
Yeah,
So, but you can get them at 21 Wire. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And just a quick reminder, this is the last UK column news before the summer break. We will be back on Wednesday, the 1st of September. Massive thank you from everybody at the UK column, and we hope to see you then. Bye-bye.